Hi, and welcome back to the Because She's Adopted podcast. I'm Kristal Park. Join us today as we explore navigating reunion with my co-host, Kristal Redpath. Let's get started. Hello, Kristal.
Hello, Kristal.
How are you doing today?
I'm great today. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So today we're going to discuss what it's like to navigate through reunion, finding our biological family. And to say that that is a challenge for some would be quite an understatement. Sometimes we want to go look. We don't know what we're going to find.
Yeah.
You and I have very opposing sort of experiences in navigating through reunion. And I love that we get to show both sides of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
How old were you when you started your search?
I was 17. I had asked my adoptive mom if she could find my birth parents so that they could come to my graduation and see me graduate.
No,
and so they found both of them, my biological mother and my biological father. And on my 17th birthday, they came into my bedroom and woke me up and told me that they had found my parents.
And I thought you were going to say your biological parents came into your bedroom and woke you up. Like, that's weird, but okay.
Surprise!
So they surprised you. They went and sought out on your behalf and then surprised you with the knowledge that they found them.
Yes.
Wow,
yes.
That's pretty unbelievable and unselfish for them to do that for you.
Yeah, it was. At that time, I think that it felt like that emptiness inside of me had been filled. It was like, oh, I found that piece of the puzzle and I'm good now. Like I'm whole. But we both know that that's, no one can really fill that. Nothing can really fill that. Yeah. How about you? What was your experience like looking for your family? Did you always want to find your family?
Always.
I mean, did you always want to find Joe from
Facts
of Life?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I was about the same age. I was 17.
Yeah.
I was determined to get answers to who they were, and specifically my birth mother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the birth father I was always curious about, but I really had an intensity to find my birth mom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my adoptive mom, my mom, always knew that. And so when I was 17, she took me to a therapist out of Calgary. And I didn't know what a therapist was. Yeah. But it was an adoption therapist based out of Calgary. And I went and sat with her for an hour and just talked about what my search might bring me, which was quite eye-opening for me because I had envisioned it to go very smoothly, and I have this embracing reunion and this family sense of we're here together finally. And she was quick to bring me to reality in a gentle but realistic way. So she just was the one that kind of introduced the realization to me that I could have came from something that was a big secret. And I had never thought about me being a secret before. In just all the different ways and shapes and forms that might have happened. And just to prepare me for rejection.
Yeah.
At the onset of discovery. And rejection didn't even cross my mind either. I had envisioned that they always would want to find me.
Isn't that so crazy how the mind just, just thinks the way it wants to think or believes in the direction it wants to.
And at 17, you're a child still. And there's such a sweet innocence.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was operating from that space, operating out of love for sure.
Yeah.
And wanting to be found.
Yeah.
And wanting to find.
What a gift that therapist was to you. First of all, do we adoption therapists are very far and few between. I I think I've seen a lot of therapists, and none of them ever really felt the need to go into the adoption stuff or the relinquishment stuff. It wasn't until I sort of, wanted to do that became a thing. But what a gift she gave you, I think, would you say?
Well, it was a truth that not every story ends up the way you think it's going to end up. And in my case, I was very thankful for that awareness going into what I was about to face.
Yeah.
So was I a secret? Were they remarried and they kept me a secret from their new spouse? What would I do if I made contact and they decided, I'm sorry, this can't happen? How, just kind of preparing my heart for kind of the what ifs that are very real.
Yeah.
And I left that just kind of really digesting that, but still not thinking that was going to happen to me. I just didn't see it. But I was really thankful for the knowledge, for sure.
Yeah. When I was born in the hospital, my birth mother had written me a letter and given it to my Auntie Judy to then give it to my adoptive mom, who was then supposed to give it to me when the time was right. And, it's interesting how I got the letter, because I think I mentioned in the previous episode that my mom and I had a really contentious relationship. We were always butting heads, and we were having one of our big blowouts. And I can't remember exactly what it was about, but I said something like, you're not my real mom, or I want to know, you need to tell me. If you know anything, then you need to tell me. And she said, you want to know? You want to know? And she went into her bedroom and pulled out a box from the top shelf in her closet and pulled out this letter and threw it at me and said, here, fine.
Ooh.
And, it was a really negative way to receive a letter that was intended to be something so beautiful. But I know that my mom, it came from a place of hurt. She was, and fear, like maybe one day I would find my mom and maybe then I would reject her, or, there was a lot to it. And so anyway, I opened up this letter and it was in her handwriting, and she called me Melissa in the letter, and then told me who she was, told me that I had a brother that was 2 years older than me, and told me that she wanted to one day meet me. And so I knew from the time I was 13 until, my parents had found my birth mother at 17, that she did in fact want to meet me. So I don't think that I ever worried about being rejected by her, because
you had read that?
Yeah, because I had read that.
So knowing that you had this brother out there from a young age, what was that like?
It was mind-blowing. Like every time you find more little nuggets of information, it's like your brain kind of expands and you're like, oh my goodness, a brother? Where is he? What's he doing? What does he look like? I think I said to my mom one day, Mom, what if I accidentally meet my husband and it turns out to be my brother? And she's like, Kristal,
I found the love of my life. Wait, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I kind of thought that when I found my biological family, I'd show up and I'd be like, ta-da, here I am, and they were all going to throw me a big party and be happy. And they did. It was a great experience. We did meet, and my parents flew me out to Winnipeg, and I met my birth mother. And in the documentary, there's this one scene that just breaks my heart every single time I see it, when my biological mother and I are embracing. And then you can see the camera kind of pan to my adoptive mom. And she's got this look on her face of just it's almost like a look of sacrifice.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Like
that's touching.
Like setting herself aside, but also like so much pain. it took a lot of courage, I think, for her to allow me or to facilitate that reunion.
Oh, and to put herself aside so you could get some answers. Yeah. My adopted mom was the most beautiful human being in that way too.
We're so
and I never
lucky.
once felt like I wasn't her kid. Not even once. Like
No.
I am her child.
Yeah.
But she also gave me the space that I needed to answer my questions. Like it was my journey, not hers. She wasn't controlling in any way, and she never made me feel bad either. Very supportive.
There's so many, families out there that when, the adoptee does go to search, the family rejects, their
hard.
adoptive family rejects them, you know.
It's hard.
Yeah.
I understand.
I know now that most likely the reason why my adoptive mom and dad were so supportive in me finding my biological parents was because they were, in fact, birth parents that had relinquished their own son at a young age.
Yes.
And, I often think, was that reunion, in the airport, just a reminder for her of, her loss and her grief and her son that she had given away, and that I really feel for her. I think it was, at the time there was so much more going on than I even really knew. You're young and you think you know everything. You think you see all the sides of the story, but you just, I didn't until many years later.
At that stage and age, it's all about us.
All about
us. It's true.
Yes.
Yeah. It's very, we're young.
Yeah.
I mean, now I can look at all parties involved and how everyone would have been feeling at that time. But back then, all about me.
Yeah. Yes. So you went to search for your biological mother.
I did. So at that time, as soon as I turned legal age, which in Alberta, that was 18 at the time, I was able to apply to social services for my official records. Okay. You would apply to social services, and it's like the DNA test now. If there was a match,
okay.
So yes. I applied, submitted for the opportunity to meet any of my biological family through the social service network. And if there was a match, then they would facilitate a meet and greet on our behalf. Like they'd contact both parties. So I waited. I submitted all of my documentation, and I waited a couple months before I heard anything. So I got a letter in the mail, and it said, basically gave me the letter that I read in the first episode, and just said, we're sorry also to say there's no match, which means that nobody on my side of the family was looking for me at that time. So I remember feeling excited that I had this documentation because it's what gave me my legal surname. So I had my full legal first and last name and a little bit more information about my situation that I had never had. But on the other hand, I was extremely sad because I found out nobody was searching for me. So that was starting to kind of going back to what the therapist was kind of preparing me for. I just assumed that there was going to be this reunion happen easily. So to find out that they weren't searching for me was kind of a shock, to be honest. But I had my legal first and last name. From there, I was sharing this information with my at then boyfriend, who I ended up marrying, and his family. I was too nervous to make the initial steps to do the searching. There was something that was holding me back. My father-in-law saw my legal last name and knew I was born in Edmonton. So back then you open up the phone book and you just kind of go down the list of the matching last names. And he just started making the phone calls. So I remember sitting around the island and he was making these phone calls, and literally phone 2 was this little grandpa that had an English accent. And I knew he was from England just based on the adoption records, my bio grandpa. And he said, I have a young lady here that's searching for her biological family. She was born September 17th, 1978. And the little man on the other end of the phone was super polite. Yes, well, my daughter had a baby on that day and kept her for a good part of a year. So it was like literally my search was open the phone book. It was that simple. I was like, wow. And I remember just being totally freaked out, but didn't know how to handle the churning that was going on inside. I had no idea. And I didn't know how to talk to anybody about it either. Yeah. So he said, let me call her and I'll call you guys back. So he phoned his daughter and told his daughter that I was searching, gave the phone numbers, and then we were able to get in contact over the phone. And we wrote letters for a couple months at that point in time. And I learned that I had 2 little half brothers. And then the time came for us where she came to my hometown and we met.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty surreal.
Yeah.
I almost remember like when I was going through that, it was almost, I thought I'd be more emotional. I don't know if I was a little bit disassociated from what was actually happening. Like I don't know if it was a protective mechanism.
Yeah.
But I remember her staring at me like a deer in the headlights. And she said that I looked like a spitting image of my biological father. And it took her back. And she was having a little bit of trouble at the time, like just really staring at me, staring at my every move, the way I would move my body, the way I would answer questions. And she said if she would have ran into me in like a mall or in the public, she it would have knocked her over. She would have known that I was her and his baby because I looked exactly like him. Wow. So that was actually the first time that like, man, I need to find this guy.
Yeah. He sounds really good looking. Gorgeous.
Well, I'm like, how do I look like a dude? I didn't know. I was like, but I started to actually, whoa, I got to find my bio dad now. Yeah. You know, and she gave me some information about what happened after relinquishment because I was so curious to find out, okay, you guys lived together. You were just a little girl when you had me and you tried to make it work. And I learned that they had withheld the information from their families that they were putting me up for adoption because both sets of grandparents wanted to adopt me, but they wanted a fresh, clean start and they wanted me raised in fresh, clean environment. So they withheld the information, put me up for adoption. And back then, grandparents had no rights.
Yeah.
But that was, I think, part of the reason why their relationship failed is because they moved to British Columbia to start over again, but they were coming without the baby. Wow. And the grandmother at the time, just couldn't take it anymore. So when I say she couldn't take it anymore, she was so resentful to my biological mother. It just forced my biological mother to move back to Alberta. And they parted ways. And I'm sure there was lots of other factors, but it was very difficult for the family. Wow. Yeah. Wow. But I got to meet my 2 half brothers, and that was very interesting. This little 9-year-old and 7-year-old.
Did you look at their features, their face, their hands, or your biological mother?
Her, for sure. Yeah. I inspected her.
Yeah. Yes.
I did, but really didn't, I don't know. I didn't really see much of a, maybe other people noticed it, but definitely didn't look anything like my biological brothers. Like they're very fair complexion and they were very excited to see me. I was their show and tell in their school. You know what? Back when you can do show and tell in classrooms, well, I was their show and tell.
Oh my goodness.
They had this sister and yeah, it was pretty cool.
That's really special.
Yeah.
So it initially went well.
It did initially.
Yeah.
And not to say that it went, nothing blew up, but it dissolved as quick as it started.
How so?
Well, I was getting married, invited her. They came to the wedding. So my biological mom, her father, and the two little boys came to my wedding. One special memory I have was my biological grandfather. He pulled me aside and he said, I need you to know that every time somebody asked me how many grandchildren I had, I always included you. I know. And he's like, I just need you to know that you've never not been my granddaughter. And I always told everyone about you, even though I wasn't in their life. So it was very special.
Wow.
He passed away shortly after that. Yeah. He was a sweet, sweet man. But not long after that, I was pregnant with my first daughter, Matea, and I phoned. We hadn't talked in a while, and I remember trying to call her, and I can't recall now if I called her to tell her the news, but it wasn't long after that I got a letter saying she can't do this anymore, and I was devastated, and I was trying to call her and emailed her, wrote her a letter saying, did I come on too strong? Did I do something wrong? Was I too much? Like I again, like that's my default, right? Like what's wrong with me? And she says, no, you didn't do anything wrong. It's just too hard for me. And I can't continue this relationship.
Yeah.
And I remember like I had logic enough about the circumstance to know that it would have been a really traumatic time in her life and the split between her and my bio dad, that it would have been beyond tragic. But I just wanted her to somehow separate me from the tragedy.
Yes.
Because I was coming from a place of pure love and I just wanted to be seen and I just wanted to be accepted. Full well knowing that she wasn't going to be my mother. I never put that on her. I just wanted a relationship. And she's like, I understand, but I can't. And then that was it. That was, I was 20, 21, no, 22.
Wow.
No, maybe 21, 22 years old. And we haven't spoken since.
You know, I always have found this whole reunion thing interesting and challenging because there's no name for the relationship that you have with a biological parent when you're adopted. Because they're not your mom. Like they're not stepping in to be your mom. They're not like a sister. They're not like an aunt, because it's this really unnamed relationship that has, you don't know what the boundaries are around them. You don't know what role you're to play. And I think both people come with expectations that make it really challenging, because maybe, like in my case, I felt like my birth mom was like, oh, I found my daughter. You're my daughter. And so she wanted me to call her mom. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't.
Right.
And I felt like I couldn't do it because, number one, it felt disloyal to the mom that had raised me.
For sure.
And I just couldn't, I couldn't bring myself to say it. As I got older, I tried a little bit, but it never felt right. And yeah.
But yet on the flip side, I think for a baby, your biological mom is your first love. And you just can't put words to that, right?
Yeah.
But they are.
Well, and they remember you, but you don't cognitively remember them.
But I think you remember them. right? Not
like
what you're
yeah,
saying.
like
Even just doing the research now of what goes on in utero.
mm-hmm.
And I think that's where some of that abandonment rejection wound happens is at baby level. Like
yeah. Like, I can't imagine the because in my case, my birth mother knew she was going to give me up for adoption. So she spent that entire pregnancy knowing that she wasn't going to keep me. And that's got to have some sort of impact.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
I know I battle with this whole thing that I was like unwanted, and maybe it wasn't me that wasn't unwanted specifically, but it was an unwanted pregnancy.
Yeah. I know it's going back to that second rejection that I experienced. I wasn't prepared for that. I really needed some help. So, and I was still so young at the time too, but it really shattered me to experience a second level rejection from the same person, especially someone that I fantasized for 20 years about. I put them on a pedestal and I felt so let down, not from her, but really it made me think there's gotta be something wrong with me now. She didn't, on one level, she didn't want me then and she still doesn't want me now. And I kept racking my brain, like, what could I have done differently? Maybe I shouldn't have wrote her that many letters, or maybe I shouldn't have that, there wasn't really email.
Yeah.
I mean, there was just starting to be email more, but I just really went into this stage of like eating myself up. Yeah. And it just almost reinforced what's wrong with me mentality. And not that she would never have thought that was what was going to be happening, but that's where I know that embarking on that journey, I really needed some support systems in place to help me not take it on so much personally on a personal level. But I didn't have the support system in place. I was trying to deal with it all on my own and in my own body, in my own mind. And there was such a huge disconnect there.
It sounds like you being in her life was painful, that you were this reminder of this period of her life that maybe she really wanted to let go of or forget about, or was too painful to look at. And, I think about because I would sit on the phone with my biological mother for hours talking. And she had so much guilt and shame for giving me up, so much. Like, and there wasn't a conversation that she didn't apologize for what she did. Wow. And I would always say to her, like, it's okay. It turned out how it was supposed to. And it got to the point for me where I was like, oh my gosh, every time you look at me, you see your pain, you see your guilt, you see your shame. And that didn't feel good for me either. Like when your kids walk in the room, your face lights up, When you see your child, you're like, oh my gosh, there you are. Come on in. Like that wasn't, I mean, I'm sure part of her felt that way, but the other part was quickly reminded that I was a representation of a very difficult time in her life.
I remember writing in one of the letters about myself saying, I know that I must represent kind of a ghost in the past, but please don't make me that ghost. I don't want that. I don't want to be connected to any source of pain.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can't, I had to just show up.
Yeah.
And I did. And she did too.
Yeah.
But ultimately it is what it is. It was too hard on her. And I accept that. I do think I heard from her once to tell me that she ended up getting remarried. And I am in contact with her biological brother, and her niece. They all live overseas. I've managed to stay connected with them, but nobody else in the family. It was just too difficult to navigate that.
Yeah.
But I hear you on the pain factor. You don't want to be pain for anybody.
No.
No,
we
not at
already
all.
feel like there's something inherently wrong with us.
Yeah.
And then to add that onto it, it just, it doesn't feel good. You know my story, that the man that we thought was my biological father for 20 years turned out he wasn't, because I did a DNA test in 2021 and found, had a match with the real biological father. But the first biological father had rejected me and said, I guess you are a blood relative, so you do deserve to know your family history. Just him saying that was enough that I never called him again for 20 years. Because I felt rejected. And it was like, okay, you don't really want anything to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
I understand now. I understand it better now. I think he deep down knew I wasn't his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And he probably wanted to protect the both of us from having, a relationship because can you imagine, we have this 20-year-long relationship and then I find out who my real father is? That was just,
wow.
That'd be really hard,
Really hard.
Yeah. When I found the real guy, he just embraced me. And he wasn't a big, famous, wealthy movie star or anything like that. He's a very simple, kind person that was very honest with me about who he was, where he's been, what his past looked like. And so we've been getting to know each other for the last 2 years. And it's interesting because he feels a lot of guilt for not having raised me.
Did he know?
No.
So that's
I know, but it's just interesting. He feels so much guilt, and he's apologized to me a number of times, and I feel like he really tries to make it up to me in different ways, and that.
How often do you guys communicate now?
We probably text one another. Like sometimes we'll text each other a lot in a small period of time, and then we won't chat for a few months, or it's very sporadic. And I think he's been very sensitive to me in the way that I feel like he has absolutely no expectations on me. And I feel like he's sort of let me lead in terms of what I'm comfortable with, in how often we talk, how long we talk, all of that. I think he's been really sensitive to that. And I appreciate it, because my biological mother, I think she was just so grateful to have me back that there wasn't a lot of boundaries within the relationship, and I didn't know how to set boundaries because I was a people pleaser. And she would, we would talk, and, I would feel almost held captive by her on the phone. Like I would have to be on the phone with her for sometimes 3 hours. And, I was a young woman. Like I don't know. I just didn't have the support to navigate through all of that. It was hard. And there's been periods of time where I haven't spoken to her for many, many years. There's been periods of time where we've been a little bit closer, where I've had her out to my home to stay. But it has been a very difficult road. People, like what you were saying, you think that you find the one person that you think is going to be that missing piece to your piece. And then you do, and then it's not. And
there you are.
And there you are.
I love the part in your film. One of my favorite parts was you're reuniting with your biological dad, and he just held you and said, I honor your tears. Like how thoughtful, especially since he had no clue. And 30 some years later, he finds out he has this child.
Yeah.
But beautiful for him to react the way he did and to let you experience him.
Yeah.
And he had the kindest, softest words for you.
He did,
I loved
didn't he?
it. Yeah.
It was like all of the rejection and the pain that the first biological dad left me with. It felt like in that moment that was all healed just from his words. And for him to just hold space for me to cry and just for it to just be what it was in that moment. I really had no words to say to him. My mind was completely blank, but I was so overcome with this emotion that he was my father. And yeah.
And you had navigated a reunion with your biological mother for years at that point. So you're probably very well prepared for the second reunion in terms of maturity and understanding of what was going on emotionally.
Yeah.
For both of you, like it would have been a pretty perfect time in life to have that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like, I felt like I was in a place where I had the support systems that I needed, including feeling connected to the adoptee community. I also felt like I just had a thought, actually. It was a hard finding out he was my father and finding out that things weren't the way we had thought they were. It really shook me to my core. Like I don't even have the words to describe what it did to me, but I was just walking around like mind blown, mind completely expanded. I really felt like everything was making sense again, or things were being put in order or something. I can't explain it, but it was very emotional. And I cried more that summer than I think I'd ever cried in my whole life. Like I just had I felt like my emotions were just below the surface for months and months and months.
Do you think you got something unjarred that maybe was blocked for a long time and you could actually finally grieve?
Yes.
And let go?
Yes. Because it wasn't just him that I had found. So when I had done my ancestry DNA, I'd been connected to this uncle and his name was Dino Marino. Do you get more Italian than that?
I love that name.
I know. And he's awesome. And so we were messaging back and forth because we couldn't figure out.
This is your uncle on your
dad's side. We were messaging back and forth for 2 years. We couldn't figure out how we were connected. And he was so sweet. One day he sent me a message. He's like, please don't take this the wrong way, but do you think your mother was artificially inseminated? I was like, never thought of that before. I don't think so.
Can you explain why you guys weren't, how did he not make the connection?
We couldn't make the connection because I hadn't been matched to my biological father yet.
Oh, so this was off of ancestry.
Yeah.
You couldn't make the biological connection.
We couldn't figure out how we were related. So when I found my biological father when we had the match on Ancestry, and he was one of the first people I called, and I said, hey, do you know this guy, Greg? And he said, I know exactly who your father was. His mother was my sister. And so I'm your great uncle. Welcome to the family. I love you. Like, nice. He was just so wonderful. But like I had said, we were talking about, when I found my father, something unlocked for me. Yeah. And the tears really just started to flow. And I didn't feel completely safe to talk to my adoptive mom about it, but she knew that I was going through stuff. She knew that I had found him. She was so happy for me. She was so supportive. But this one day particular, I was having an emotional moment, and she kind of scooped me up in her arms and she rocked me. And while I cried, and it was like, you know, it doesn't matter how old you are, you still need a mom, you know? You had found your biological mother, experienced a second rejection from her. And then did you ever find your biological father?
I had his name, his full name.
Yeah.
That's all. I knew he was in BC somewhere. So I just, you know, my life just kept going, and I ended up having 3 kids. I had 3 kids, and it was just always I always kind of churning in the background. And I, you know, it's funny, I'd gotten ancestry kits.
Yes.
And then just let them sit on the shelf and go stagnant. Never, ever. I have one right now at home, and I've never taken it.
I relate to that because I got mine, and mine sat there for over a year before I finally took it.
Yeah, I know.
What is that? What is that?
I don't know. I'll take it. I'll take it. My other daughter, she has my complexion and my skin color, and she's like, "Would you just take it? Because I want to know." Anyway, that's a sidebar. But back to like thinking about pursuing the search for my biological father. I was Googling, just searching his name on the internet, searching. And what ended up happening is I came across this very old obituary. And it was someone with the same last name. And when I read in the obituary, it said pre-deceased by his brother, and then my biological father's name. And it's a very unique name.
Yeah.
So I knew it had to be the family. So from there, just went on the search and ended up finding the family on the coast in BC.
Aww.
Yeah. So what happened was, again, I was not ready to go and knock on the door of where I thought my biological grandparents lived. I knew that my biological father had passed away, or I was assuming he had passed away, and it would have been pre-internet because his obituary wasn't on the internet, but his family members was. So I kind of already had made peace with that knowledge, but I was very curious about his life and whatever happened to him. Yeah. And that's kind of what spurred on the quest to find the grandparents. Plus, I knew, just in speaking with my biological mom all those years ago, is that they really wanted to raise me. So I felt the push to do that and to kind of tie it in. So my former spouse went with his friend and went and just knocked on the door because we didn't have any way to know phone numbers and we knew they were senior citizens at the time too. So tracking down a cell number. So he just went and knocked on the door, and my biological grandmother answered. And the minute she made the connection, she stumbled back and she sat down on the stairs. And she's like, "Angel?" They used to call me Angel. Yeah. And she's like, "Angel?" I mean, I'm probably butchering the story because I wasn't there firsthand. But she then invited them inside the house, and they had photos of me down the hallway still hanging 30 some years later, because I was the only granddaughter to their son that had passed away. So they had photos of me and him taken when I was still living with him as a baby.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was special. Very interesting that, you know, for me to learn that there was a family out there that still had me hanging in their hallway all those years later.
Yes, that you weren't forgotten.
Yeah, no.
That you weren't a secret.
Yeah.
that you were part of their family.
Yeah.
And you meant something to them.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And, you know, the knowledge of him, I mean, I saw photos of him and yeah, there's similarities. And he had the big dark hair and the olive skin and he, you know, the big blue eyes. And it was kind of an interesting, it was very, I loved it.
Yeah.
But then I also learned like he tragically, he had cancer and he had chosen a very difficult path. And he ultimately took his life at a young age. So learning that information was devastating. It just was devastating. I never imagined that for him.
Yeah.
But I was able to meet his family and I was able to meet his sister and his sister's family. And they were just so warm and loving. We never ever kept in touch though. You know, we had a beautiful weekend together and the grandmother, my biological grandmother, had passed away a year later. So I was able to kind of make peace with that. But we've all just kind of went our separate ways.
Well, first of all, I am so sorry about your father.
Thank you.
I can't imagine, you know, seeking and then that's what you come to, you know. Wow. So as it stands today, you have a relationship or you're in touch periodically with your biological mom's brother and niece.
Yes.
And
her mother.
And her mother.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you ever feel drawn to reach out to your biological family anymore at all? Or have you over the years?
You know, I think I'm hesitant to open that door. There's a bit of a fear there, especially when it comes to my half brothers.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're curious. And I'm always here.
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe I will, or maybe they will. But right now I'm pretty content yeah, I mean, I'm always in contact with my biological cousin.
Wow. You know, I felt with, like, as I said before, with my biological mother, we would go through periods of, you know, talking a lot. And then if I'm honest, I would really just pull away and I think I would kind of disappear. And I think that was really hard for her. But, you know, she chose a really difficult path for her life too. And she struggled with her own trauma because she was taken in the 60s scoop and from her reserve in Manitoba and adopted into a family and, you know, adopted essentially to replace, this was what I was told from her, to replace a child that they had lost and as a playmate for one of their other children. And so she has her own trauma. She has her own adoption trauma and her own pain. And so it makes it difficult for us to come together and have this relationship because I think we both really trigger one another. But I think we're both kind of hurting in a lot of the same ways. As I got older, I realized that I needed to set boundaries with her. And there was times in my life where I just didn't have the capacity for her to be in my life. And so I stepped back. And it was strange because every so often when I'd get that tinge of loneliness, I'd have this desire to connect to her. And it was so odd because it was like the little girl in me who fantasized about her and thought of her that wanted that connection. And then I would reach out and then it would be that same kind of dysfunction and disappointment again between the two of us, which I contributed to as well. I'm not just saying it was her. I think a lot of people think, oh, well, if you find out all the answers, then you're going to be whole and you're going to be okay and you're going to have peace and you're going to have healing and all of these things. And I actually don't think that's the case at all for me. Anyway, I feel like I searched and searched and searched. And I think I got more answers than most adoptees get. And it's interesting because at the end of my film, I do come to this realization that I belonged all along. But I think what happened with the men in my life, like my husband and my adopted brothers and my adopted dad, they saw that I had come to this place of peace and rest and healing. And I think they thought that it was because I had found everybody. And I'm letting them believe that. They can believe that. I think that from the outside, I think that is the obvious, conclusion that they came to. But I don't think that was what gave me the peace at all. I think it was coming to this place of self-acceptance and self-love and self-compassion and recognizing what I needed to work on in terms of healing certain traumas and that. And I think it was through that work that I have come to this place of peace and contentment. Because the reality is not a lot of people, not everyone gets to find all the answers. Some people don't get to find any answers, but they still have to be able to come to a place where they aren't living this tortured life.
Yeah, for me, finding the answers closed some chapters for me for sure, and were very helpful. But ultimately, it was about finding myself.
Yeah.
And I remember reading a book in Rick Warren's Purpose Driven Life. And there was a chapter in there, I think it was like, "You are not an accident."
Yeah.
And, understanding my life has purpose and meaning. It's divine. You really helped me gain the strength to find myself, my true self, and what I can offer, what I mean. Really finding gratitude for my life and finding my wholeness through me, not through the search, not through attachments. Just really trusting in myself, reconnecting with who I am, but also who God made me to be. That's been a game changer for me in my journey. Definitely finding the answers because I was just a naturally curious person. But ultimate healing came from me finding myself and knowing myself and loving myself.
Yes.
Truly loving myself.
I think one of the things for me in the healing process too was not just being able to love, but also to be loved. I think that I had a really hard time allowing myself to be loved, allowing myself to be accepted by others, not because, you're just in this place of like hypervigilance that nothing is safe or.
There's like layers that we keep peeling off as time goes.
Yes.
But I don't look back at my past now with pain. I actually can hold it as sacred. It's part of who made me to be the woman that I am today. And I want to always, like, as soon as I feel myself shrinking, I want to be able to step into that wisdom that I can give others and learn from my past rather than being held captive by my past. It's just my past. It's not going to dictate my future anymore, but I'll honor it.
Very well said. Thank you, Kristal. I just have so much gratitude for you and for your story, and because it touches me and it helps me too. So
yeah, we can heal from other people.
Yeah.
It's so, thanks for having me on. Like, this is great. I love it. It's always the weird, awkward, like, how do you?
I know, like, how do we
Thank you,
back
Kristal.
out of the room?
I know.
You know? So like, no, it was great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for joining us today on the Because She's Adopted podcast. Please like and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Leave a rating review wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you next time.